So the thought I had in my mind, so we have been going through, last week we touched on, and this is the 7th week, we touched on the fact that we're talking about the second wave. We're thinking it's going to definitely come back in process and it's going to go through. Last week on the 1st, the schools opened and car showrooms, really oddly, but whatever it was, car showrooms, businesses were starting to open. This week, we're already starting to see for next Monday that more businesses will be allowed to open, such as the high street stores, the furniture stores already open. And on the 15th, which, is coming up, it'll be compulsory in public, which is going to be now an official breach of law if you're out on public transport without a face mask or gloves or something of that sort of nature. So just to be very clear. Bali, I'm just going to mute you a second. So there's a bit of noise there. Okay, so with public agenda in context of stopping the reinfection ratio. Now, the country that seems to be ahead of everybody when it comes to this control of the current COVID conversation is Korea. Korea seems, the South Korea specifically, they seem to have kept, I think, the whole country's deaths to under 500, which I think is just an unbelievable conversation here. But my point in discussion is what specifically, I think we've got another person, Am, coming in as well. So what specifically do we think we did right? Or what specifically do you think we did wrongly during this process? Now, it's easy to just have to think about this, everybody. It's easy to pinpoint a finger and say, they did this wrong, you did this wrong, they did this wrong. Let's have a think about it openly in a discussion to try and put a positive spin on what we've actually achieved during this time frame. Hi, Am, just let you know as well. The conversation we're having is very simple. So open table. If it was my opinion, I'll give you a humble view on this, that I personally believe that things weren't done so badly because the public agenda, we know what, if you think about it, I think it's in episode 5 or 6 I spoke about on the Daily Tips show. I spoke about the actual real energetic flow of actual lockdown, war, any kind of global push. So if anybody...
Episode 7 it was.
Episode 7, okay. So episode 7, I talk about the psychometric of lockdown, of war. So if you want to watch and see those 4 stages, you're welcome to have a look at that as well. Please, if you do me the grace of if you do go onto the channel, please do subscribe. It assists us to get the message out further. And please do comment. It really helps, and like. So in context of the flow, we are currently in the UK. We're in what we classify as the 3rd phase, which is about the focus of freedom. I want my rights. We want to get ourselves back into the flow of things. I think everything's fine. The frivolous context, possibly, and I'm talking from a medical conversation with lots of my medical background doctors, where we're, as a human race, as a British population, we're starting to send vibration through social media, where we're making it a less of an importance towards the fact that COVID, people are becoming, well, if I'm going to go one day, I'm going to go one day. But please do understand, I'm not being loose in my conversation that I have had 9 people who I know personally who have died from COVID. So I'm very, very affected by the deaths, and our heart goes out to everybody, and may they see the light in their next life as well. But my principal conversation is that it's real, it's there, it is there, and we can simplify the conversation about the fact that it's not infectious, it's not going to affect us. We have nothing to fight it with currently. So the open conversation is how and why. What part of our body, what part of our country's management of it was different to other countries? Now, Korea, China are semi-dictatorial environments. So if the country says you're going on a lockdown, this is exactly what you're doing, then the country locks down and everybody just conforms in a much, much easier way. Even when we go to Europe, the actual lockdown was higher, stricter, much stricter than what it was in England. England was quite flowy. And even then, our 4 nations, being Britain, obviously England, Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, also did it in their own way as well. So any thoughts?
I think these guys bungled it. Everybody was ahead of us. Italy was ahead, Korea was ahead, and all they needed was to copy it. So on the one hand, Rishi Sunak did an amazing thing, put out so much money out there. And on the other hand, and I think this isn't personal, Boris going sick and nobody being in charge. What they should have actually done was appointed 3 ministers, 1 for testing, 1 for PPE, and 1 for contact tracing, and close the airports. If they'd done that, it would have been a lesser impact. And in terms of financial, I mean, there's something like 14 billion going out a month in terms of their COVID furloughing and so forth, which is really great. But they haven't put that much percentage of that money into all the other stuff. They should have been a bit more proactive and on their game. And, you know, and there's no excuse, because all you had to do was copy some of the other countries. There's too much dithering and not enough leadership.
380 billion is what has already gone out of the allocation for the next 12 months. 380 billion, just to be clear. Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask a question then, if there's something on there, just to evolve the conversation? Britain, United Kingdom, is much more, Dil, just to get clarity in your mind as well, just so I can ask the question if I can, just in a humble way. Everybody, this is a safe space to share any view you've got. There's no condemnation. There's nobody sitting there saying, oh, I don't believe in, don't agree with what you're saying. I want everybody to be free flow thinking. This is not a sales platform. This is about us. It's about us sharing and getting ourselves in a state of safety and action for the future, if that's okay, in a positive way. So other countries that took lockdown in a different way, they actually, do you genuinely feel, this is an open conversation, that the actual general country psychology would have been as acceptant in the UK as it was out and about? Because UK is very free thinking, and UK is very, very diverse, probably more diverse than nearly any other country in Europe. And that, my question to yourself is that, isn't it the right way to slowly change and create change so that everyone doesn't just reject it and say, we're not doing it? It's just a thought process.
I agree with what Dil was saying about the fact that there was a lot of differing and a lot of kind of hesitation by the government. I mean, a free-thinking country, a Western country like New Zealand, that seems to be the great example at the moment. New Zealand, very similar to the culture we have in the UK, just as diverse, just as multicultural, and they were able to get things kind of narrowed down very quickly, and to the point where they've had no cases for over a week now. So I think a nation like ours can do it because other nations in the world, very similar to the way we do things, can be done. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a dictatorship type of nation where, like China, where, you know, if it's enforced, that's it, people follow it. And I think going back to the first question, I mean, I have daily conversations with my wife when she comes back from work. She works in the NHS. And I think the big thing in her service as mental health services is it's not so much the public that are going to need the support. It's the NHS staff who've gone through this for the last 10 weeks. The trauma and the stress of having to almost, they say they feel like they've had to play God with patients who lives and who dies. And I think it's been terrible on their part that they've had to make those decisions. And I think they're the kind of stories that don't really obviously go out in the media for obvious reasons, because they don't want people to react to them. But I think the reality is it's been really tough, and I think it's taken its toll on a lot of people in different ways. What I was saying to Rav earlier about the fact lockdown has probably helped me, but on the flip side, my wife has probably struggled with it because of the fact that she's had to deal with more pressure, more difficulty, more caseload really during this time.
So a couple of things. New Zealand, just to lighten it a little bit, it's run by women. Hello. That's why we got to where we got to in New Zealand quite quickly. The whole shebang was run by women, and we know how to get stuff sorted. We don't do that. We just do what we need to do and get on with it. So,
I'm not going to say a word because I'm married to one.
On a bit more of a serious note, though, do I think that we could have done things quicker? Yes, probably we could have done. Difference is we're living more in a democracy in the UK than most other countries. I'm not going to say all countries, most other countries. I think if they'd have said on Monday, you're in lockdown as of tonight, I think everybody would have gone into shock and you would have had a huge meltdown. It would have been an absolute meltdown. A lot of people would not know what to do. And to know that you now can't step outside as of 6 o'clock this evening, for argument's sake, I personally would have struggled with it myself more than I did initially for the week or so when we first went into lockdown. It would have been so difficult for especially people who've got medical appointments and so on, the elderly. My parents live in Birmingham, you know, they live by themselves. All of a sudden, you can't now go and see them. We couldn't prep anything, nothing. I think it would have been, this is my personal opinion, that it would have been too much to just go into lockdown like that.
Yeah, I agree. Truly, yeah, that's a lovely, lovely thought, isn't it, team? Yeah.
I think it's, from my point of view, looking at down on a common sense level. I mean, so far, I thought I had every faith in Boris and the government, and you know, knowing the trajectory of what they were doing, not just for myself, elderly father, and children in their schooling. But recently, Boris, when he said it's okay to go out, then it's not, then everyone was taking the mick out of him. And then also in the news, Dominic Cummings, he's a political strategist, but he went, you know, to travel to see his parents. And I didn't judge him for that. I was just thinking that, you know, if I was in his position, what would I do if my parents, you know, were away from me? And so then I just have to think, you know, what Jatinda said earlier is coming away from the crowd and thinking about this, not just about the content that you're putting on. We have to think intelligently, what are we actually doing in our actions? So, you know, I think it's best to scan all the information, step back, and then look at it with different eyes, and not necessarily do top down what the government are saying. Just think about it, compartmentalize everything that you're doing in your life, and then looking at it with clarity. So yeah,
I think they always say what's happened has happened. We should focus on the future. I think this government has a lot of challenges going forward. It has a hospitality market that's been decimated. It has an airline, aerospace that is on its knees. It has a high street that is on its knees. It will expect a deep recession, high unemployment, with women, people who are lowly skilled, the youth will be looking for jobs, and if they're not sorted, there'll be a scarring effect. I think the challenge is going forward, and we have nothing to achieve unless we're full of all the facts, which we're not. There'll be some kind of commission that will do a public inquiry. I think the challenge is going forward. I think it's a scary time in front of us. I think that's where the government should focus now.
I think we also have to look at what's happened very recently. I think at the beginning, we were looking at what are people doing? We've given instructions, are people taking it? And then we'll lock down harder if we need to. You only have to look at what's happened in the last week, where the restrictions were relaxed slightly. We still had to keep social distancing, yet in Dorset, we had a packed beach, a packed field with cars. It just shows that this is down to public perception of what's important to them as opposed to what's important to the country. And I think when we first started this, we were looking at, you know, people will take on their own instructions and will deal with it sensibly. As soon as they found out that it wasn't going to be done sensibly, that's when we went into harder lockdown, because all the other countries were in lockdown, and Italy, Spain, Germany, the death tolls are still spiraling upwards, even though they're in total lockdown. So I think the way it started was because we were looking for people to take action. When they didn't take action, we then had to go into crisis management and to put things in hard place.
Yeah, so I just I feel this whole situation was new for everyone around the world, right? So in one way, all the actions that everybody took, they took with the best information they had at that moment in time, and they did what they did going forward, right? Mistakes have been made, lessons have been learned, and this is something that they're gonna obviously have more information for if it ever happens again, kind of thing. So there's no kind of hindsight in this, because you couldn't have done it any other way. We just done it the way it happened. And as a global community, it's almost like a split test. You know, the different countries are doing it in different ways, and all we can really do is take that data. And it's like Ninda said, it's just about taking that data forward and then seeing what we can do going forward now. And we shouldn't really look at what's gone in the past now. I mean, we learned from it, but we need to move forward with everything.
I think, you know, going with what Ninda and Jatinda have just said, like whatever's happened. We've learned from it. We've moved forward. Coming from a media perspective, I'm going to be honest, it was a complete and absolute shambles with how they dealt with the country. How is the country able to trust the government when No one had planned for this. I get it. But start bringing in people into play that are going to be able to handle the situation. 1 or 2 people can't handle that. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I am very scared for the future and the next generation. Look at all the industries. Every single industry is going to suffer. You've got, the young creatives, the music industry. You've got the hospitality industry. Like, yes, we're going to move forward, but how are we going to move forward? Government needs to start, like, upping their game and bringing in fresh people or bringing in a team, because whatever they were doing before is not going to work. Those old ways are not going to work. They need a new vision of how the country is going to get back onto its feet again. So that's my perspective on it all.
Thank you very much. Everybody, I mean, wow, what an open discussion, what an honest discussion. And I thank you all so much for being a part of the Feel Good Friday series.